Is that going to mess up you taking notes or anything?
I don't think so.
Okay, because otherwise I can make somebody else do it. You just happen to sit in the front, so.
Actually, Matt, he's picking it.
And you have Adele.
He's picking it.
And I have Adele. Okay.
Hey, Adele won the Grammys.
Adele won what?
Adele won a Grammy.
They don't have good
Waka, waka,
keyboards
waka.
here in HP, no? They don't have keyboards in HP or no?
They don't have wireless ones that I've been able to find.
Hey,
Where's the keyboard?
I think they do have wireless.
They probably do. I just
I love them.
yes.
I found that one on Smart Buy before.
You know
I
what
found
you do? You just say, Hector, shut up. That's all you gotta do.
We are? Okay. My name is Jeff Holderfield. We're going to talk about CloudSystem Matrix, and what we're going to do is we're going to start out doing. Am I in the wrong spot?
Yeah, fine.
We're going to start out doing a little whiteboarding, a little bit of discussion, just kind of laying the groundwork, because I saw some eyes roll earlier when cloud was mentioned. Why is that?
Just overly used.
Exactly.
Everybody's using it for everything.
It's the most overused term, not only in our industry, just in general. I mean, you look at Microsoft, how many different definitions of cloud do they have? 10, 15, 20, depends on what week it is, right? So cloud is just a very used term right now. So we want to make sure that we're kind of on that same discussion, we're having the same conversation. Before we really get into this and what the products are, if we don't have the same definition of what cloud means, then we're on the wrong, we're not going to have the right discussion. So for HP, what it means is really the ability to go to a portal and request either infrastructure, software, platform, or business processes as a service. Basically, a service catalog to request some sort of infrastructure and be able to build that in the infrastructure, build that in the background. Make sense so far? All right. So, if you think of our management software, you heard about that this morning a little bit. You heard about insight control, things of that nature this morning, right?
Yeah.
Jeff Carlett talked about that.
Yes.
So if you think of our management software, think of a Matryoshka doll. Do you guys know what a Matryoshka doll is? You know the Russian doll where one doll is inside of the other, inside of the other, inside of the other?
Now-
Which one do you want me to draw on?
Huh?
Which one do you want me to draw on?
Draw on that one. That actually, yeah.
Look at
Okay.
the screen right in front of you.
Do what?
Right up here.
Yeah, I get in trouble if I draw on that one. So if you think, again, like that Matryoshka doll, SIM is here, right? So you got HP SIM. This is what SIM looks like. It's a very text-based way to look at the world. It gives you health monitoring, tracking, allows you to see what's going on in your infrastructure. It's not just limited to HP. Again, it uses SNMP and WebM, so you can track servers, routers, switches, whatever. As long as they talk HP or WMI, it works, right? You can begin to see what's going on from a health status. You get just indicators. You can get traps, things of that nature. As you move up a little bit higher in the stack, you get into insight control, which is what Jeff talked about earlier. Some of the things you get with insight control are pop quiz. Here we go, guys. ILO Advanced, RDP, Rapid Deployment Pack, and Altaris-based deployment engine, Insight Power Manager, some other features, right?
Sure.
If you click right here where it says USE 95 OW, you get to a more graphics. Insight control is a more graphics way to view the world. So you can see your blade enclosure, you can see the health status of everything from a more graphics way to look at the world. So as you move up the stack, it gets to be more graphical. Then you get into CloudSystem Matrix. This is our private cloud offering, all right? So this is the box we're going to stay in for the rest of our demo. Make sense? As you go higher, you get into CloudSystem Enterprise. This is a hybrid cloud, and what we mean by a hybrid cloud is you have your private cloud functionality, but you have the ability to reach out into a public space. Like if, in this case here, let's say I've used up all my blades, and I need to deploy something. I need to deploy something on physical host. I can actually reach out into a public cloud provider, HP or Savvis, deploy that service out into the public cloud provider, but it's part of my network. It's part of my Matrix operating environment, but it's built out in the public space. As you go a little up, the top tier is CloudSystem Service Provider, and this is where you are actually hosting the public cloud yourself. So you're the public cloud provider for your end users. Does that kind of make sense so far? As you go across this continuum, it is a It is an upgrade. It's a growth. So you can be at SIM, grow into Insight Control, grow into Matrix, grow into Cloud System Enterprise. It's not each time you have to start over and build a new environment. You can grow what you currently have. All right? So starting, click where it says Tools. You go to Infrastructure Orchestration. Now, Matrix is more than just what we have time to look at today. What we're going to focus on for the next hour is Infrastructure Orchestration. And this is that window or that view that gives you that self-service portal or the ability to go to that catalog and request the infrastructure. Infrastructure Orchestration has 3 views to it. You've got the administrator's view. The second tab here is the user's view. And the third tab is the designer. That's the architect. And we'll get to those 3 roles as we go through this. Any questions so far? All right. Resource usage. The resources, these are the resources that have been made available to the cloud. These aren't all the resources that I have in my environment, but they're the resources that the server, storage, and network teams have set aside to be used for this on-demand infrastructure requests and builds. So if you notice, your servers, storage, and network segments have places that they log into this. Again, Active Directory and LDAP tied into that. So as the server guy logs in, he has access to the server page. The network guy has access to the network tabs. He can create, if you want to click on one of them, you can. So the network guy clicks in, and he has the ability then to create networks that get presented to CloudSystem to be able to be used and consumed on demand.
So those are all pre-created by an administrator?
These are by the network administrator, not just an administrator. So again, from a perspective of as a network admin or even a storage or server admin, I don't have to give up control of my pillar, if you want to call that, or silo. I don't have to give up control of I can make those resources available to be consumed as needed, but I still control those resources. I'm just making them available to CloudSystem. But yes, so they go in and create this, and so they do the pre-configuration setup. Now again, one of the things we get accused of being is proprietary. I agree to some point. Can you take an IBM blade and stick it in a Cisco chassis? It's not a trick question, guys. No, right? That's proprietary, right? IBM's proprietary inside their enclosure. We're proprietary the exact same way. Inside of the C7000, you got to put an HP blade in there. Okay. Once we leave that enclosure, doesn't matter what network you have out there. Cisco, Juniper, whatever, HP, N, doesn't matter. Storage is the same way. Doesn't matter what storage you present to us. As long as it's fiber channel, it's a LUN that we can connect to, it's out there. Well, fiber channel, iSCSI, virtual storage, we can use that. But so from a perspective of the servers, the storage, once we leave the enclosure, we're 100% industry standard. Go back here.
So you can have any server be a part of the CloudSystem matrix, any manufacturer?
Any HP blade.
It just has to
Again,
be an HP blade.
it's an HP blade,
Okay.
but the storage and the networking,
It can be anything.
it can be anything.
But it has
So-
to be an HP blade.
Right. Now, here's a kind of a dashboard for the administrators to see servers, virtual servers, storage, networking, so they can see how their resources are sitting at current. And as things get used, you can set up traps with this to say at 80% utilization, 80% consumption here. I want to know about it. Send the storage guy a trap so he can know to go create or go add more virtual storage to the environment. Make sense so far? Questions? All right, so let's switch to our user perspective for a second. So go to that second tab right there. Go ahead and log in. We're actually connecting into equipment out in California because this is cloud, right? Cloud means we're supposed to be able to manage it whenever, wherever. So we're using equipment that's out in California, not stuff that's in here. So this is, again, the user page. We logged in with a different user. His account was Steve instead of administrator. What you can do, again, with this being based off of Active Directory and LDAP, you can say, and you can limit the access by user or by domain group. So you can say this domain group, the test and dev only has access to a certain amount of resources, certain amount of services. If you notice down here, resources are vastly different than what we saw on the first page, right? So amount of servers that are available, we had 6 on the other page, we've got 2 available here. So we've limited what this user can see. Click where it says templates, right here. So this is that service catalog you heard about in some of the cloud strategy sessions. This is the list of services that are presented to this user. Here's a description, Here's a cost, and here's some notes if you want to add them. Click on where it says DB test. Now hit view details right here. Down here you can see some information about it. You can see a picture of it. So single server, single LUN, multiple networks. The cost. Now the cost, you may not have a billing system in place. But what you can do with this is run reporting to show how much each group is used, how much each organization. You can break down by organization to where each organization has a subset of resources. So an organization with multi-tenancy capability to where you can have different domains, different groups, each have their own resource pools. What you can do is then use this cost to be able to charge back and show, well, this group, maybe the database group, they claim they only use 10% of our resources a month, but they actually use 35%. Or they're using a lot more storage than they claim they are, so maybe we need to bill them a little bit more during budgetary discussions. You don't have to actually do the chargeback, but you can use that as information gathering. Go back to the list view. Right here. Now hit web server down at the bottom. View details. This is a virtual machine, so single virtual machine, single boot device, multiple networks. Again, here's the cost. Go ahead and create service for us. Hit options. Somebody have a question? No? Service name. The service name is just a text string, so the user can keep track of, as they request multiple services, what this service name is. Host name completion. When the architect, that third role, created this service and put it out on the self-service portal, they put a wildcard in for the host name variable. So our wildcard is, it's a hash sign with, in this case, it's web01. Okay? So whatever I put in this box for host name completion is going to fill out that wildcard. So go ahead and put something in there for us. The email, this is where the user is going to get any correspondence. The service is out for approval. The service has been approved. The service is ready to be used. Here's your access credentials. Here's your IP address. Here's how you get access to it. The notes section, this can be used for whatever you want. This is just kind of you can use it for governance process. This is why I need this service, however you want to use it. Lease start, lease end. A lot of times what you're going to see, not only in your environment, in your day-to-day job, but just as you talk to and have interactions with folks, what you see is people have a lot of services that had been requested for projects or for whatever. They've been built, they've been used for 6 weeks, 6 months, however long. The users haven't touched them in months, right? They're just sitting out there stagnant, more with virtual resources than physical hosts. But in both cases, there's a lot of stuff that's just sitting out there stagnant, right? What this allows you to do, at least start, I'm a project manager, my project is kicking off in 6 weeks. I don't need it today. Set it to build at a future date. Set it to that service to start a couple days, week before my project kicks off. Lease end allows you to remind the user, hey, your lease gave you a 30-day lease on this. 7 days before you get an email, do you need to extend this service? If I say yes, I get billed for another 30 days. If I say no, at the end of that 30 days, that service gets deactivated, which means it gets shut off. It's not deleted, it's deactivated. As an administrator, you can go in and delete the service if you want, but what's going to happen if you do that? It's gone. What am I as the user going to say?
Why you delete it?
Well, I need my service back, right? Underneath this, there's a workflow engine that you can create, and you can add workflows into these process steps. So storage, all storage, whether it be HP or third-party storage, have APIs for scripting backups and snapshots, right? I can't think of a vendor that doesn't have a standard API. In that workflow engine, you can put in an API to go take a snapshot of that LUN before you delete it. So you say delete, the first thing in the step is it goes and sends API to that storage, take a backup or a snapshot, whichever one you choose. When I get the return code back, then it goes through with the deletion. Now if the user comes back in 6 weeks or 6 months and says, hey, I need my service back, you go and you restore the backup and you can restore the service. But in the meantime, you've reclaimed that resource. So you can deactivate it and just reclaim basically the CPU and the memory, or you can delete the service with a backup and then completely restore the LUN and everything else as well. Make sense? Billing code down here, this is again where you could just put in some information about how you would bill this back. Go ahead and hit submit for us. I hit view request because we don't trust Matt. Because after dinner last night, I heard that he's not very trustworthy. We actually logged him in with somebody who has to go through approval. So right now, if you look down here, it says approval is required. This user, again, is a basic user. So if we go back to our administrative portal, there we go, and click right there where it says pause for approval. What happened is the administrator got an email, hey, there's a service out for approval. You notice, click on that. You'll get the information down here. You get a little bit more detail than the user had, but you see the same information. Now you have your approve or reject button. Go ahead and approve it for us. There's a notes option. Hit OK. Now it's going to begin to build that service. In our case, it's a VM, so it's 15%. Go back over here. User sees the exact same information. So the user is no longer sitting there bugging the administrator going, hey, where's my service? When am I getting my... They can go to the self-service portal. They can request it. They can see the status of it. They can know when the service is up and running. See how a user would use this? Physical and virtual the same way, rather than, in some cases, maybe you're running vCloud Director, so you can give that self-service portal through vCloud Director. But how do you do your physical machines? You have to go through and do it manually. This way you can do both. Now, vCloud Director or System Center can actually be called by this system in the background. We'll see how we do that here. Any questions on how a user would use this anymore before we move on?
What about multi-tenancy? I mean, can you have administrators for company A, administrators for company B, and
Yes.
users for both?
Yes. So go back over here. Here we go. Organizations tab. I only have one organization set up here, but here you could go in and create an organization, and each organization, so you would have, say, test and dev, and then they'd have their pool of resources, and then production, and then they'd have their pool of resources, and each one would have an approver, and then you can also have the master approver above it, the system admin that can approve for both.
Jeff, can you partition it off to where Group A can't see what Group B has got?
That's exactly how it's set up. I mean, somebody in Group A will never even see the services or know about the resources that Group B has. So that's part of when you log in, and we said when we logged in with this user over here, if you go back to the templates, go back to the list view, right here in this system I've actually got like 9 to 12 services available in this environment, but this user only sees what, 5, 6? So you can do template access restrictions. So you can say that Frank here only gets to deploy virtual machines, but Matt, he can deploy physical and virtual. So when Matt logs in, he's going to see more services than Frank would. So it's very easy to, even within an organization, limit what a user can see, but also at an organization level as well as at an individual user level. Domain group, treat it all the same. Any more questions? Okay. Go ahead and go to the third tab right here. There we go. Go ahead and log in. Now we're logging in as our third role. This is our architect role, or our designer. The designer is typically going to be somebody from your IT staff. And what they're going to do is they're going to work with the rest of the organization, the server, storage, and network teams. And they're going to say, what are we trying to automate here? Did you break it?
Yes.
There we go. So click the plus right here. Double click where it says DB test. Look familiar? This is the one we just looked at from a physical perspective. So Frank goes to our self-service portal and looks up and sees DB test. And he's like, well, I like it, but I need another LUN. So Matt, as our architect, going to grab another LUN, drag it and drop it out here. Now if you hover your mouse over the little gray dot, it'll turn darker. Move up just a little bit. Left click and drag. Green dot lights up. Now save it. Go back to our user portal over here. Go to DB test. We may have to refresh the page. Hit F5 for me. We didn't pick it up. Hit F5. Now go into your services. Templates right here. I'm sorry, templates. DB test. Now you see there, you can hit view details there as well, but you see the additional. So if a user comes in, you can very quickly change this to add more resources or change the specs of a service as users need. Now, honestly, would you typically do it that way? No, you may do a save as and create one specifically just for Frank and let him do it because maybe not everybody needs that second storage line. Okay, go back here to Matrix.
So can a user from this state then add different resources?
No. The user gets what they see.
It's templates only.
Right. So again, this is what you look at is, in most cases, customers or end users or IT managers deploy, for the most part, the same thing over and over. And they've got a build that they've tested. This is what you're going to automate. It's those one-offs that you can then go in and create a one-off template for, or you can do manually if you want to do it that way. But what it does is most of the time you're going to spend that you're doing a very repetitive task. That's what this is helping you free up from doing. Go back over here. Double click where it says web server. This is the virtual machine we just requested. So this is the architect's view of that. Hit the plus right here next to working. Double click bursting example. So remember we talked about right here where we said hybrid, where you could do public cloud and private cloud together. This is a bursting example. And what I mean by bursting is, let's say in this case, these servers, they host a database. And that database, by governmental regulations or whatever, I have to keep physical security on that database. But my web access, the web portals for that database, I don't care where they're hosted. So what I can actually do is when I deploy this, set it up to where this portion of the service gets deployed in the public space. This portion of the service gets deployed in my private infrastructure. So now I've got half of that service running out in the public cloud, half of it running in the private cloud. That's a hybrid example of how you could use this tool. Make sense? Look like you had a puzzled look on your face, Scott?
No.
Okay. Any questions on bursting, how that would work? So HP or Savvis? Now this is an example of a template. Double click where it says Exchange 2010. This is an example of a cloud map. What's the difference? More options, prettier colors,
Complex.
more complex,
stuff.
a lot more stuff. To some extent, yes. Cloud maps can be very simple. What a cloud map is something you go to hp.com/go/cloud maps. You go to a web page and it looks like this.
Pre-validated.
And you can see pre-created services for commonly used applications. So in this case, Microsoft, McAfee, IBM. We've got, I can't remember, I think we're at like 30 right now, 30, 35 cloud
Over
maps.
100.
Huh?
Over 100.
Oh, we've cracked 100. Okay, well, wow, I'm a little bit out of date on that
Well,
number.
you're right in the sense that on those traditional cloud maps, you've got 30, but we opened it up on April the 10th to where we included some of the software. So we changed the technology, we still call them cloud maps, anyway, 100 plus.
Okay,
A
so
lot to change.
there you go, over 100. Well, what a cloud map is it's a way to deploy an application. You deploy and it's a pre-built configuration for you. You notice right here it says 5,000 users and 1 gig mailboxes. Because we know every Exchange environment is 5,000 users and 1 gig mailboxes, right?
Right. Yep.
Exactly. Something else you download with this called a sizer. You download it, you run it, you update it just to make sure you got the latest data. And then you say, well, I have 10,000 users and I have 250 meg mailboxes. I use DAG and I have 3 DAG servers. And it will go in and reconfigure the template, or the cloud map, sorry, to match your configuration. So instead of you having to do the math to figure out, well, how much storage do I need to increase so the best practice scales correctly, that tool does it for you.
Whose guidance do you use on that size? Microsoft's or real world?
It's a
Because Microsoft.
nice comment.
No, I'm actually in the middle of an Exchange design now, and I've been doing that for a long time. And I use the Microsoft tools as sort of a baseline, and then divide the storage by 6 because they overestimated it so bad, and not by 6, but they're conservative to a fault with their tools.
It's a combination between HP and Microsoft. What, from a hardware perspective, you need, because again, we're using our hardware, so performance metrics and things of that nature. So it's an HP and Microsoft combination of what that best practice would be using Exchange on our hardware. So
Yeah, I wasn't trying to slam Microsoft.
no.
I would love to see them not be so conservative, but it would be much more helpful guidance.
Right. Any other questions on what a cloud map is? Okay. So, hit new. We'll do a little role playing. Matt's our architect. We're the IT staff. Okay. Matt, we need you to make a hypervisor cluster. Go.
Okay. Make a hypervisor cluster?
Yes. So, ESX or Hyper-V? Let's do Hyper-V, right? Because
That's it.
we're not limited by hypervisor, meaning we support Microsoft or ESX. We're not saying you have to use this hypervisor. We're not saying you don't have to use this server or these storage or this type of network. So grab you some physical servers, drag it out there. Grab some storage, drag it out there. Network, drag it out there. Connect it up. Now, if you notice up here, there's a little red X. That means validation status means I can't publish something on that self-service portal that isn't validated. It hasn't been checked by the system to make sure it will deploy properly. So if you hit the button that says Show Issues, it's going to highlight for us where the problems are. So there's some things we need to go fix. If you hit Messages, a little box is going to pop up with a text version. Go ahead and hit Hide Issues again so we can kind of close it. Double click into this, and what we'll do is we'll step through what it is. If you notice, there's some red X's on here telling us exactly what we need to go fix to make this operation, to validate this. Some boxes, again, showing us. Jump back over here to the Config tab, because as we're making a cluster, there's a couple things on this page we want to do. The group name, this is just a text box again, so as some of these get kind of busy, some of those you saw, like the Exchange one, there's a lot going on. This text box helps you keep track of what this part of the service is. Server type, physical or virtual, there's a drop down there. Cluster type, so there's a couple different options there. We're going to leave cluster type alone. You could select VM host and then select subtype. We're going to leave it alone for our example. Cost per server. The server section, the network section, and the software, or the storage section, each have a cost section, a cost value in there. So the storage is by gig, per gig of storage. The network is by IP address, and then the server is kind of open. We're not prescribing how you do that, because what if you want to charge licensing in there? Maybe you want to charge back part of the blade enclosure, however you want to do it. Service level agreements. You may put the same service out there 3 times with 3 different costs. One's bronze level, service silver level, gold. You know, your SLAs can be built into that as well. So if you want to put a cost in there, you can. $5. Number of servers.
Frank.
Number of servers. We're making this a cluster, right? Number of servers would be more than 1. Change that to 2. Whoa.
Look at that.
26.
Well, he's only charging $5.
That's a big cluster. Hit OK. Now we're at 2 servers, 2 boot devices. So we know as we scale that up. When you see a box there with a number in it, that means we're going to build that many of that number. Double click back into this. Now, because we went to 26 here, it made the maximum of 26. Again, we were talking about making this a cluster, right? If I want to scale this cluster up, if I make this maximum number higher than the initial number, what that means is the initial, it's going to build 2 to start with. But what it's going to do is give me the option as I need to go in and say, add a server. And it's going to say, well, how many servers do you want? In this case, I have the ability to add up to 24 more servers to my cluster. So I can scale this service up to 26 without going through the full approval process. Now, obviously, this is not something you would give just a random user the ability to do to build a hypervisor cluster. But this is a way you could scale services very easily for your IT staff. So maybe they get an alert that says your hypervisor, your ESX or Hyper-V cluster is at 90% resources on something. They go into the self-service portal, find the cluster, say add server. It's going to ask them how many they want to build. In this case, let's say we say 3 more. It's going to go out and build 3 more, and it's going to add them into that cluster. Make sense how that would work? Processors per server, memory size, and processor speed. Now, if you look at this is the minimum acceptable value for this service. Do we want this to be our minimum acceptable value for a hypervisor cluster? I mean, can we really deploy all that many VMs on one 1 gig processor with 512 RAM? I don't think we've sold a server with those specs in about 3 years, but that's the minimum acceptable value. So what you can do is you can go in here, let's say we've got two different types of servers. We've got some 460s with 2.5 gig processors and 16 gigs of RAM. Then we've got some 460s that have 3 gig processors and 192 gigs of RAM. What do we want those to land on? The 3 gig ones, right? We can go in here and say, change that back to 2. This is sockets at this point. So 2 sockets, change that to 192. Put gig. Processor speed, 3,000. 3,000. So now what we've said is our minimum acceptable value for this service is a 3 gig processor with 192 gigs of RAM. So when the service gets requested, it's going to go out and look in the resource pools. It's going to see some 2 gig servers. It's going to ignore those. It's going to see some 3 gig servers, and that's what it's going to grab, reserve, and deploy onto. Make sense how that would work? Processor architecture, 32-bit, Itanium, or 64-bit. So if we select 64-bit, over here on the software tab, it grays out everything but my 64-bit OSs. So you see 64-bit, wait, go back to here. If you selected Itanium, it would hide everything but the IA64. So everything's grayed out now. Go back to config, hit any so we can see the full list. You notice down here there are some that are still grayed out. Those are VM templates. I can't deploy a VM template on a physical host, so again, it's graying out. So checks and balances throughout here to make sure that it builds it the correct way for you. So nothing else left here. If you wanted to add a workflow, that's where you could do it. Go ahead and go to the networks. Remember that we talked about that wildcard earlier? From a user perspective, this is where that wildcard gets completed. So go ahead and put something in for the host name. Okay, so notice how it goes to a kind of a green-yellow. Hit Shift 3. That's what enables the wildcard. If you didn't hit Shift 3, if you just left it as HV1, what's going to happen is I can deploy the service once, then I'm going to have to go in and change the host name here. This allows that variable for the user. The networks here, automatic is a pool of static addresses, so 10.1 to 10.10. When the service gets built the first time, it's going to grab 10.1, 10.2, 10.3. Static, if I want this service to have this one specific IP address when it gets built, I can select static, specify P's is going to light up, then I can put in those specific addresses. I'd have to change it the next time I want to deploy it.
Is there an option to let the deployer choose their IP address?
At this point, no. Trying the deployer pick the IP
For the
address.
user.
So if you
Deploying this.
use CloudSystem Enterprise here, you get the BTO suite of software. Okay, with that the full featured operations orchestration, I think there may be a way to script that into where it sends a request out, and then once it gets the response back, I need to verify that though to be 100% sure. But I think there's a way you can do that from a workflow perspective.
Sure.
Because this one gives you a lot better enterprise and service provider. You get the full featured operations orchestration, the BTO suite of software. So your flexibility with that workflow engine gets a lot greater.
Right.
Select DHCP for our example. Software. Win2K R2. You notice size of software 225 gig. Hit OK. Double click into the storage. What's our LUN size? 10 gig, right? Don't change that. Leave that at 10 gig. I'm gonna create an error. Cost per gig. Here's where the storage team would put in their cost. The RAID level, just like I can say I want a 3 gig processor with 192 gigs of RAM. Here I can say I want a RAID 6 array or whatever. I can be prescriptive of the type of LUN I want.
What is the auto?
Unselectable RAID. Basically, it's if they haven't when the storage team sets up the storage pools, if they don't list what type of RAID type it is, auto will just pick something that doesn't have a RAID type associated with it.
Okay. Let's make it fast.
Check the box that says disk is bootable. You got that error. It was saying you selected a 10 gig LUN, but you had selected a 25 gig image to be deployed. We fixed it for you. If you notice up here, it's already 25 gig. Hit OK. Now our validation status is a little yellow bang, basically meaning at this point this would work, we just don't have a network cable plugged into it. Double click into the network. Again, remember we looked earlier at the network. These are the networks that the network team has made available for us to use. So I, as an architect, can't go in and say, I want this on VLAN 23, and all of a sudden start talking on VLAN 23. The network team has to give me access to that network. So select deploy, just for our example. Here's where the network team would put in their cost if they wanted a cost.
Happy they're cheap.
Hit OK. Now,
Matt, can I buy servers and storage from you?
Absolutely.
exactly. Now,
Absolutely.
if you go ahead and look at the cost of this, you put $5 here, right? That's per server, so in this case, it's actually going to be $10 because you got 2 servers. But, are we done with creating our cluster, our hypervisor cluster? Our Hyper-V cluster, sorry? Is there anything missing from an infrastructure perspective? What are we missing for our cluster?
Oh,
No, the
No, we got no-
hypervisor.
Well, no, we,
Oh
we
no,
got
it's in. Yeah, never mind. Yeah,
shared
yeah.
storage, right? Where are the VMs going to land?
Oh,
Grab you some storage. Because these are our boot devices, right?
Oh. Yeah.
Connect the storage up. Double click into that. We have 2. We want one LUN mapped to all of our servers. This can be shared across servers. Hit OK. You can increase the disk size if you want. But now we've got one LUN that's mapped to both devices. Remember, we could scale that cluster up. So if we scale it up with a couple more devices, that LUN is going to get mapped into all those future devices, and they're going to automatically join the cluster as need be. Make sense on how that would work? There we go. We just created a Hyper-V cluster in what, 5 minutes, 8 minutes? Or how you can deploy one over and over again. Now go back over here. CloudSystem, yes sir. All VSE resources. All right, so this is a view that you get with Matrix called Virtualization Manager. So if you notice, you can see my ESX host and my VMs, my ESX host and my VMs. This is the one we just built. It's up and running. Now, ESX, if this were a Hyper-V server, I would see my Hyper-V server and its VMs. So I can see my virtualization environment from the same window, ESX and Hyper-V. In this case, I only have ESX built on these machines. But if you had Hyper-V running, you would see those VMs as well. Over here, you see a big white space. What do you think that's for? You guys have any servers running on ESX host, maybe running on Dell? Matt does over here, right? Or other, or even maybe HP rack servers. You can load an agent on there, and then you can begin to see those VMs, those hypervisors, and VMs here in this white space. So you can begin to see your entire virtualization environment from a single console. You notice the little wrench with a swish on it? It means it's a logical server. So what I can do, let's say this guy down here that we just built. Say we're getting, because remember we've got SIM down here, right? We've got SIM running in the background. We start getting notifications that this ESX host is going to fail. It's going to come down due to a thermal event or something's going wrong with it. Check the box here. Tools. Logical server. Now slide over to the right. Now hit move. What it's going to do, it's going to go out and it's going to ask vCenter, what other devices are in this cluster? It's going to come back and it's going to say, well, in your case you've got 2. If I had 10, it's going to give me a list of all 10. It's going to tell me what's going on those hosts. It's going to give me the option of saying, do a vMotion move over that device. So here in a second, it should pop up. What it's allowing you to do, instead of spending a lot of time console hopping, helping you make the decision. So you can see here, select that. I can't move it here because this is where it's at. Hit move. It's going to come back. Are you sure you want to issue a vMotion move on this? Hit confirm. Now it's going to come back and tell us our status of the job. Go ahead and hit done. Now here in a second, you'll see this guy move up to here. We've just issued a vMotion move from inside control. Do the same thing with System Center with Hyper-V VMs. Now, one of the other things to do with this logical server isn't just a VM. A logical server can be a physical host. So if I wanted to move this VM down to that physical host, I would do the same thing. Tools, logical server, move. That's going to be an offline move. It's going to power that host down. It's going to migrate that VM over to that physical host, and when it comes up, it's now that host is now running on that VM, or that VM is now running on that physical host. So you can go virtual to physical, physical to virtual, virtual to virtual, vMotion, hypervisor to hypervisor, ESX Hyper-V, tools, logical server, move. It's going to power that VM down, pull out the ESX tools or Hyper-V, whichever direction you're going, put in the other hypervisor tools, bring it up. Now it's managed by that other hypervisor. The other thing you can do is go physical to physical. Let's say you've got your Gen 7 blades here. You just got your new Gen 8 blade in. Tools, logical server, move of your ESX host. It's going to power that ESX host down, move it to the new generation of hardware, and power it up on the new physical hardware. MAC address, worldwide name, drivers, all that will get changed in the transfer. Take about 30 minutes. But now what you've done is gone from a previous generation of hardware to a new generation of hardware. From the outside world, nothing has changed. The host name, MAC address, everything is exactly the same. The cluster still works, everything is still exactly the same, but you've now changed the hardware component underneath. So logical servers have separated out the hardware, whether it be physical or virtual, underneath from whatever the OS and the application running on top of it is. Make sense on how that would work? All right. How much time do we have? You guys haven't talked a whole lot, so
We have
10 minutes. 10 minutes? 20 minutes?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay.
Talk
Questions?
about shortening.
Yes, sir.
Jeff, can you explain, you said that you've got on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got RHP here. The white space on the other side is allowing you to see.
Well, what you can do is you can run an agent on some other, whether it be a rack server or some other vendor's hardware, if it's a hypervisor host, and then it will allow Virtualization Manager to be able to see and show that hypervisor environment.
So my question is there any management we can provide there as well, or is it
You
just-
can do vMotion between the two.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot we can do for the host perspective. But we can do vMotion between those devices because they're in the same hypervisor cluster. But I mean, we can't issue and do, move that host to a physical host over here. We can't pull it in that way because it needs to be licensed as a logical server. But we can work on the VMs.
Even can you do a VM in a third party to physical in the matrix, or you have to go?
Well, what you would have to
Hypervisor
use,
and then
what you
down.
would have to do is use server migration pack
Okay.
on that device, then pull it in, and then once it's in, then you can convert it to a logical server. I mean, to license something as a logical server, you literally just check a box and say license as a logical server, and then it gets licensed. So yes, you could do that. It just wouldn't be automated. So what's actually happening underneath the covers is server migration pack is being used, but in this case, it's fully automated. Whereas if you're pulling things in from the outside, it would be more of a manual process. You would boot that device off of an ISO, answer some questions, tell it where you're wanting it to move, and then you could go through that move process. One of the other things you can have, if you notice over here, there's a planning tool. There's really not a whole lot to see on that tab, but what this is called a capacity advisor. This allows you to run historical data. Let's say you're going through a virtualization exercise. You got 20, 50, however many servers, older generation, you want to virtualize those down into VMs. You can begin to run, you can load some agents on there, run and load historical data, track up to 3 years worth of data. Then you can run what if scenarios. What if I want to take these 20 servers, consolidate them down into, let's just say 50 servers. I want to consolidate them down to Gen 8 blades. I'm going to use a 460, and I'm going to have 2.5 gig processors, and I'm going to have 96 gigs of RAM. I want 30% memory overhead, 40% processor overhead, 25% network overhead, just for growth. How many ESX hosts am I going to need, or how many physical servers am I going to need to do that migration? It's going to run a tabulation. You can even put in power cost, and it'll tell you how much it'll cost at the back end. It'll say you're going to need 4 servers, or however many servers, using those specs, and then you can begin to tweak those specs and and find your best consolidation. And then it's going to tell you exactly how to consolidate it. Move these 15 VMs, and it's not going to go 1 through 15. It's going to go 1, 3, 7, 25, move it to this one. So it's going to break that consolidation down to give you the best possible consolidation plan for those devices. Any other questions? You guys are very quiet. This is not what I was expecting.
I think, when was the last time the whole, and I know it stems from the interface being together with everything. When was the last time they did a major redesign of the interface?
Well, when we went from 1.0 to 6.0, there was a lot of changes to the interface. There was a whole lot of usability studies that went on during that time. So when we went to Matrix 6.0 and 6.1, there was a lot of changes. There's some more subtle changes with 7.0, not as many. But we jumped from like Sim 5 to 6 and some other. When we went to 6, we tried to consolidate the numbers because you had Sim 5, but you had Matrix 1.0, and you had this, 2.3 and whatever. When we went to 6, we said, okay, everything's going to 6.x. When we did that, we consolidated the interfaces. We did usability studies and whatnot, and made them.
And it could just be me, but it seems there's a lot of information on the screen. I know you're dealing with complicated things, but it would be hard for me to look at that every day and process it compared to like the new the Insight Cloud interface. And like Matt was saying, he didn't
You mean
like
Insight Online?
Insight Online. Yeah.
Well, Insight Online, all that is showing you is
It's a lot
really
less.
your high-level
Yeah.
data. So if you go back to like all systems, actually, really what Insight Online is showing you is that box right there.
Well, and I might be alone
But
on
it's
this,
showing
but it
you
just
some
seems
more
like a
information
lot.
when you click on it. But from a high level, it's showing you kind of a dashboard view, and then you can drill down into those dashboards. Again, we're drilled down into the information at this point. So much like if you start out, tools, infrastructure orchestration from an administrative point of view, you see a little bit more high-level information. You see, basic information.
Yeah.
So again, as you drill down, you're going to get more and more information presented to you. So it really depends on what view you have.
Frank, are you saying that this information is too much?
It not necessarily too much. It just seems like there's a lot to process on the screen at one time.
Okay.
Then that's again just from me looking at it, and a lot of this stuff I don't deal with a lot, and so that might be why I'm saying that. But that's just my initial impression. I think the base interface, and that's where I was going with this. I remember using this along the base interface. I think it was with Sim
Right.
a long time ago, and it doesn't seem like it's really. There's a lot more information, and it's gotten prettier and easier to use, but it seems like it's still the same base interface. And there's good things and bad things, I guess, with that. But
Well, right, and that's why it does build. So if you hit this tools bar again here, just for example, just hit the drop down. If you just have Sim, you have like one, maybe two options in this list. And as you build up the stack, again, that unlocks more and more functionality within the environment. So yes, it does add more stuff on the screen. So just a plain Jane Sim environment, it's really that right there. That's the view you're going to have. You're going to have a little bit more information, but this is going to be your kind of way to look at it. And again, that's a lot of information. That's why as you go to Insight Control, you get more of a dashboard feature. You get more of a little bit cleaner way to look at the world. But you can see, your different tabs and what the columns mean and what they, health status, warranty status, things of that nature. So what would you like to see there?
and I guess I'm more of a simplistic kind of person. I just want to see what I need to see to do the job, and I guess it's different for.
So you like
each person.
like the Inside Online view though?
Correct, where it's got what I need to look at, and if I need to drill down, I can. But
Okay.
for instance, this screen here, it has a lot of stuff
Mhm.
in front of you, and it'd take a lot for me to process it.
Now, if you hit, now you can break it down a little
To
bit
me.
more.
Overwhelming.
And
if
I don't
you
know, you guys speak up, but that's just my.
Well, I mean, I've been using Sim for a long time, and the information it has is just phenomenal. But I do tend to agree that sometimes it is a little overwhelming. But when you look at it for the first time, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know where to go.
Actually, hit the. hit-
And that's kind
So
of
the
where,
tree
yeah.
view
Shrink
over
that down
here,
here.
there's links in
Eventually
here,
you
just
drop
drop
down,
down
Through
through
that
tabs.
system like no tomorrow.
So you can see you can do all systems, you can do all management processes. If you notice management processors, servers unmanaged, we've got everything in this list.
Yeah.
So you can make the list smaller
Mhm.
depending on how you break it down. So
Yeah,
here, all
it
you're
is-
seeing is the servers, but
And
again.
it is highly customizable, and that I don't know. Some customers that I deal with this are so overwhelmed they can't even consider what customizing it would even
Mhm.
bring them.
It would seem like to me, that as much time as I'd spend working on this, I mean, it's a full-time job, but that's just me looking at it for the first time. And like Brian was saying, you got navigation at the top, you got navigation on the side, you got navigation inside the main box, and you know, where do I go as I'm learning to do it without really having someone show
Well,
me or teach me.
What would be nice, and we see this with vCenter Operations Manager, is put kind of the default views in the dashboards that kind of roll stuff up very simplistically, very similar to Inside Online.
Yeah.
And then as you drill into things, you start getting more and more of the detail built out of it.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
an idea I'll throw out.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah, but I think you also will get the customers who say, I want more information. I want less clicks to get more information.
You got to satisfy both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
That's how it
dashboard's way tends to, in my mind, kind of deal with that well, because you go to this default dashboard that is a good entry point for seeing here's a very simplistic view, and you start drilling into stuff and you start learning these other screens that have more detail, and eventually you get to the point where you don't need that dashboard, you don't need that pretty layer over front of everything, and you can just kind of push that aside and go back to this main default view.
Okay. All right. Oh, our management processors. Okay. Any other questions? Feedback? What do you guys think?
I think it's a good tool. I mean, I really think.
So
That was what I had. That was it.
one of the, so just kind of give you a little bit more information here. If you look at, this is infrastructure as a service, this is software as a service, and this is platform, business processes as a service, okay? XaaS, kind of all encompassing, right? So when you're talking about software as a service, you're deploying software and application, right, as that. When you get Insight Control, you get RDP, Rapid Deployment Pack. Anybody use that? Know what it is? So Rapid Deployment Pack is an Alteryx-based tool, and it's an image-based system. So you can build a master image, which most of you have in your environment, and you take a snapshot of that image and you can deploy it over and over again. Now, if I'm deploying an image that has an application loaded on it, I'm deploying software as a service, right? So these disciplines or these definitions, we put them in these boxes to kind of give an idea, but you actually have some software as a service capability here through RDP. Now, if you want full software as a service, you go here. With CloudSystem Matrix, you also get a tool called Server Automation. Server Automation is another deployment methodology that where RDP is image-based. Here's the image I want to deploy. I'm going to build my Win2K image. I'm going to load whatever applications I want there on. I'm going to snapshot that image, and that's what I'm going to deploy out. Server Automation says pick your OS, pick what applications you want to deploy. Here's your default, here's your install order that you want to put it in. Now go build the image for me. So Server Automation is a more workflow-based way to deploy things. You also, if you're using, remember when that drop-down box, that architecture we had, IE64, that's our ProLiant integrity line. So all of our ProLiant processor architectures are supported through this. Ignite is what's used for that deployment, and then you've got VMware and Hyper-V. So if you're using vCloud Director, that designer, you can point that designer to a vCloud Director template, and it's going to call vCloud Director in the background. So instead of having to have a self-service portal for your VMs and a self-service portal for your physical hosts, you can have one that will call those different tools in the background. So if you have System Center set up and vCenter, you can use both of those templates through the same UI. So you can send your users to the same portal, but use 5, 6 different deployment methodologies in the background. They don't see anything different. They just see, I want this, go build it in the different segments, build it for it. And you can even, have a segment that for the different organizations each one's gonna land in a different domain, right?
So instead of pointing Matrix at vCenter, you could point it at vCloud Director.
Mm-hmm.
And is it aware of the organizational units and, or the organizational VDCs and that whole VDC structure?
It's gonna call all that in the background, so it's gonna get, if you say pointed at this template that vCloud Director is gonna build, that vCloud Director is gonna have those organizations underneath it. So yes, it's gonna basically pass that information through. So it's gonna build it the way vCloud Director has it set up to build, which means it has those organizations underneath. So yes, it's gonna call that information underneath. Any other questions? We're gonna be done early, that's a surprise.
Well, I got a question to the group, if I can. So this, some of you guys have sat through this, I know Philip, you've sat through this before. I'm kind of curious, when you look at this portfolio of Matrix Enterprise and Service Provider, I know Jeff went through and he was talking more about the Matrix OE, but from a cloud perspective, just the cloud infrastructure perspective, does this resonate with you? I'm also going to say, does it make sense, but do you look at it like this, or do you say, I don't even care about this? All I'm really interested in is getting services. I don't really want to see what the basic background infrastructure is. What's your view on how you would consume a service?
Well, I think in the role I'm in now, it's too big for what